A simple woman told to play a broken piano as a joke, but her talent took everyone by surprise. The community center's old wooden floors creaked under Maria's worn-out shoes as she pushed her mop across them. The smell of lemon cleaner mixed with dust filled the air. She was used to this, the quiet, the loneliness, the way people looked right through her, as if she were just another piece of furniture. Maria was the janitor, small, plain, always dressed in faded clothes. She spoke little, smiled even less. Most people in town didn't even know her name. They just called her the cleaning lady if they called her anything at all. That afternoon, a group of young musicians burst into the center, laughing and joking. They were there to practice for the upcoming town festival. Their instruments, guitars, violins, a flute, clattered onto the tables as they chatted loudly. Maria kept her head down, mopping near the corner where the old piano sat. The piano was a sad sight. Its black paint was chipped, some keys were missing, and others stuck when pressed. No one had played it in years. It was more of a decoration now, or a joke. "Oh, that thing is hopeless," one of the boys said, kicking the piano's leg lightly. Even if Mozart came back to life, he couldn't make it sound good. The others laughed. Then one of them, a girl with a sharp smile, noticed Maria nearby. "Hey," she called, her voice teasing. "You clean this place all the time. You ever try playing that thing?" Maria froze. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for her to mumble some excuse and shuffle away. The boy grinned. "Yeah, come on, play us something. Bet you can't even make a single note sound right on that wreck." The group giggled, nudging each other. It was just a joke to them, something to pass the time before practice. Maria's hands trembled slightly. She hadn't touched a piano in over 20 years, but something inside her, something buried deep, stirred. Slowly, she set down her mop. The room grew quiet as she walked toward the piano. The musicians exchanged glances, surprised she was actually going along with it. One of them snorted, already preparing to laugh. Maria sat on the rickety bench. The wood groaned under her weight. She stared at the yellow keys, some cracked, some missing entirely. Then she took a deep breath and played. The first note rang out, wobbly and out of tune, just like the piano itself. A few snickers broke out from the group of musicians. One boy fake coughed "oh no" into his hand. Another elbowed his friend, already grinning in anticipation of the disaster about to unfold. Maria ignored them. Her fingers, rough from years of scrubbing floors, hovered over the keys like they were remembering something. Then she pressed down again. This time, the notes came stronger, not perfect. How could they be, on this broken old thing? But clear, deliberate. The melody was slow at first, something sad and sweet that none of the kids recognized. The laughter died. One of the missing keys should have ruined the song, but Maria's hands danced around the gap like it wasn't even there. A sticky key that should have stuck fast somehow played smoothly under her touch. It made no sense. This piano couldn't sound good. Everyone knew that. Yet, it did. The girl who'd first teased Maria felt her mouth go dry. She took music theory classes. She knew what she was hearing shouldn't be possible. That broken piano was wheezing like an old man, but the music was alive. A janitor, a nobody, that's all Maria was supposed to be. But now her shoulders straightened as she played. Her worn face softened. For the first time in years, she looked like she belonged somewhere, right there at that terrible piano, making it sing. Down the hall, the community center director paused with a stack of papers in her hands. The maintenance man fixing the drinking fountain turned his head. Even old Mr. Harris, half deaf and napping in his usual chair by the window, blinked awake. They all drifted toward the music like moths to a flame. By the time Maria reached the chorus, the room was packed. No one spoke. No one even breathed too loud. The teenagers who'd set this in motion stood frozen, their earlier smirks long gone. Because this wasn't just someone playing piano well. This was magic. The music swelled, filling every corner of the community center. People kept coming. Mothers with grocery bags still in their hands, kids who'd been playing outside, even the mailmen who'd just been dropping off packages. They all stopped what they were doing and followed the sound. Maria didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were closed now, her fingers moving like they had a life of their own. The broken piano didn't matter anymore. The missing keys, the sour notes, none of it could hide the beauty pouring out. A little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve. Is she magic? She whispered. No one answered. They were all wondering the same thing. The teenagers who'd made fun of Maria stood completely still. The boy who kicked the piano earlier looked like he might cry. His face burned with shame. This wasn't supposed to happen. The cleaning lady wasn't supposed to be this. Then something even more surprising happened. Maria started to sing. Her voice was soft at first, barely more than a whisper. But as she gained confidence, it grew stronger, clear and sweet like spring water. The song was in another language, maybe Spanish or Portuguese, but it didn't matter. You could feel what it meant. An old woman in the back began crying silently. A construction worker still in his dusty boots swayed slightly with the rhythm. Even the community center's grumpy cat, who normally hated noise, curled up right by Maria's feet like it was the most natural place in the world to be. The song built to its climax, Maria's fingers flying over the bad keys like they weren't even broken. For those few minutes, the entire room was somewhere else, somewhere better. Then it ended. The last note hung in the air before fading away. Maria opened her eyes, blinking like she'd just woken up from a dream. When she saw the crowd, her hands flew to her mouth. Oh, she breathed. I didn't mean to. For 20 years, Maria had been invisible. Now every eye in the room was on her, shining with wonder. The silence stretched. Then the applause started. It wasn't polite clapping. It was thunderous. People stomped their feet, whistled. The little girl jumped up and down, screaming again, again. The teenagers looked at each other, then started clapping hardest of all. Maria's face turned bright red. She tried to stand up, to escape back to her mop and bucket where she belonged. But the crowd wouldn't let her. Please, said the community center director, stepping forward with tears in her eyes. Play another one. Maria looked around at all the hopeful faces. For the first time in so long, she wasn't just the cleaning lady. She was someone. Her fingers found the keys again. Maria's fingers hesitated over the chipped piano keys. The crowd's expectant silence pressed against her ears. She could still slip away, mutter an excuse about work waiting, disappear into the safety of being invisible again. But then she saw little Sophie, the 6-year-old who came to the center after school, bouncing on her toes with her hands clasped under her chin. The girl's eyes shone like Maria had hung the moon just for her. Maria took a shaky breath and played the first notes of Clair de Lune. A collective gasp rippled through the room. This wasn't just some folk tune. This was real music, the kind you heard in concert halls, the kind that required years of training. As the delicate melody floated through the air, Mrs. Kowalski from the front desk pushed through the crowd. Maria Flores, she said, her voice trembling. Maria Flores, from the conservatory. Maria's hands faltered. The music stuttered to a stop. The room erupted in whispers. The conservatory, that fancy music school 3 cities over. The one that only took 1 student in 1,000? The teenage musicians looked at each other, their mouths hanging open. The conservatory was their dream. The place they all hoped to maybe, someday, if they worked hard enough, get into. Mrs. Kowalski stepped closer. I knew I recognized you. You were all anyone could talk about 15 years ago, the scholarship student, the prodigy. Then you just disappeared. Maria's shoulders hunched like she wanted to fold into herself. Her fingers curled into her palms, hiding the calluses from years of scrubbing floors. The construction worker in the back whistled low. Damn. So our janitor's like a piano genius. Sophie tugged at Maria's sleeve. Why'd you stop playing? She asked, her small voice cutting through the murmurs. Maria looked down at the child, then at the broken piano, then at all the waiting faces. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My parents got sick, she said. The doctors, the medicine, it cost too much. She ran a hand over the piano's scratched surface. The scholarship money wasn't enough, so I left school, got jobs, cleaned floors. The room went so quiet you could hear the old clock ticking on the far wall. The teenage girl who'd first mocked Maria suddenly burst into tears. I'm so sorry, she choked out. We didn't know. We were just. Maria shook her head. It's okay. She gave a small, sad smile. I haven't played in a long time. Sophie climbed onto the piano bench beside her. Will you teach me? She asked, placing one tiny finger on a key. Maria looked at the child, then at the crowd, not pitying her, but seeing her. Really seeing her, maybe for the first time. Her hands returned to the keys. Okay, she said softly. Let me show you something. And as the first notes filled the air again, something in the room shifted. This wasn't just music anymore. It was a second chance. By the next morning, the entire town was buzzing. News about the janitor who played like a concert pianist spread faster than wildfire. The local coffee shop hummed with the story, how Maria Flores had transformed that broken old piano into something magical. At the community center, something unexpected happened. A line formed outside before the doors even opened. Not just the usual seniors coming for bingo, but families with kids, teenagers with their phones ready to record, even a reporter from the town newspaper. Maria arrived at her usual time, carrying her cleaning supplies in a worn tote bag. She froze when she saw the crowd. Her first instinct was to turn around to hide. But then little Sophie spotted her and came running. You came back. Sophie grabbed Maria's hand, jumping up and down. I practiced. Look. She dragged Maria to the piano where she plunked out a clumsy but recognizable Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with one finger. The crowd broke into applause. Maria felt her cheeks grow warm. The community center director, Miss Thompson, stepped forward. Maria, she said, holding out a set of keys. We had an emergency board meeting last night. We want to offer you a new position, music teacher, full salary, benefits. Maria's hands shook as she stared at the keys. But I'm not trained to teach, she whispered. Miss Thompson smiled. You've already started. She nodded towards Sophie, who was now attempting hot cross buns with great concentration. Then something even more surprising happened. Mr. Henderson, the gruff owner of Henderson's music store, pushed through the crowd. Heard about your piano situation, he grunted. He jerked his thumb toward the door where two men were wheeling in a beautiful, polished upright piano. This one's on loan, until we can get you something better. Maria reached out, touching the smooth ebony finish with reverence. It had been so long since she'd played a proper instrument. Without thinking, she sat and played a quick scale, the rich, full tones filling the room like sunlight. The crowd erupted in cheers. But the biggest surprise came last. A woman in a sleek business suit stepped forward. Miss Flores, I'm Lauren Wright from the State Conservatory. We'd like to offer you a special scholarship for you to finish your degree at any age. Maria's vision blurred with tears. All these years, she thought her dream was dead, that she'd missed her chance. Sophie tucked her sleeve again. Does this mean you'll stay? Maria looked around at all the hopeful faces, the teenagers who now watched her with awe instead of mockery, the parents holding their children's hands, the elderly residents who'd come just to hear the music. She wiped her eyes and nodded. I'm staying. As her fingers found the keys of the new piano, Maria realized something wonderful. Sometimes life doesn't just give you a second chance. Sometimes it gives you a whole new song. The community center piano room had never been so full. Every chair was taken, with people standing along the walls and peeking through the doorway. Children sat cross-legged on the floor in front, their eyes wide as Maria adjusted the piano bench. She smoothed her simple blue dress, the nicest one she owned, and cleared her throat. Today, we'll start with something easy, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. 20 pairs of hands hovered over the piano keys. In the front row, Sophie practically vibrated with excitement. Next to her, Jason, the teenager who'd first mocked Maria, chewed his lip nervously. His mother had made him come, but now he couldn't look away from Maria's hands. Maria played a simple C major scale. Music is like telling a story, she explained. Even just these notes can say something if you listen. She played it again, slower this time, letting each note breathe. A hush fell over the room as everyone tried it. The sounds were clumsy, out of rhythm, but alive. Maria moved between students, gently correcting finger positions. When she reached Jason, he stiffened. I'm sorry about, he began, but Maria just shook her head. Show me your C, she said. As he played, something unexpected happened. The tough, sarcastic teenager's face softened with concentration. His fingers, usually busy texting or shoving people away, moved carefully across the keys. Across town, Mr. Henderson's music store saw its busiest day in years. Parents signed up for lessons, bought beginner books, asked about renting instruments. The old man grinned as he wiped dust off long neglected violin cases. Back at the center, Maria noticed an elderly man lingering by the door. Mr. Petrov, the Russian immigrant who ran the corner grocery. He stood stiffly, arms crossed, but his eyes never left the piano. During a break, Maria approached him. "Would you like to try?" Mr. Petrov's hands trembled. "In my youth, I played," he admitted in his thick accent. "Before the war, before everything." Maria guided him to the piano. His gnarled fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment. Then haltingly, he began a Chopin nocturne. The room fell silent. Notes long forgotten came back like old friends. When he finished, tears streaked his wrinkled cheeks. The students applauded wildly. Mr. Petrov looked at Maria with watery eyes. "You make us remembered," he said. That evening, as Maria locked up, she noticed lights still on in the piano room. Inside, Jason was practicing scales, his tongue poking out in concentration. Through the window, she saw Mr. Petrov walking home with his shoulders straighter than she'd ever seen them. Her cleaning cart sat untouched in the hallway. For the first time in 12 years, Maria had gone a whole day without mopping a single floor. She smiled all the way home. The town newspaper ran the story with a bold headline. "Janitor turned maestro inspires community." By week's end, Maria's students had doubled. The community center's phone rang constantly with new sign-ups. One rainy Thursday afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside. A well-dressed man stepped out, shaking water from his umbrella. He introduced himself as David Laurent, artistic director of the Regional Symphony Orchestra. "I heard the recording of you playing that broken piano," he said, accepting the tea Maria nervously offered. "Most professionals couldn't make that sound good. What you did, it's extraordinary." Maria's hands trembled around her mug. The recording Jason had posted online had gotten thousands of views, but she never imagined this. David leaned forward. "We want you to perform with us next month, Beethoven's Emperor Concerto." The mug slipped from Maria's fingers, shattering on the floor. I can't," she stammered, automatically reaching for a towel. "Old habits die hard. I haven't played professionally in over a decade. I'm just a—" "Just what?" David interrupted gently. "A teacher, a janitor. Labels don't define talent." He placed a glossy brochure on the table. "We'll provide whatever support you need." After he left, Maria stared at the brochure for hours. The concert date glared up at her, exactly 1 month away. That evening, her students surprised her. They'd stayed late, gathering around the piano like conspirators. "We heard," Sophie announced, bouncing on her toes. "You're gonna play with the big orchestra." Jason held out a stack of handwritten sheet music. "We arranged this for you. It's all our favorite parts from the concerto, simplified so we can play along with you." Maria's vision blurred as she flipped through the pages. Each student had contributed something, a measure here, a phrase there. Even Mr. Petrov had scribbled notes in his shaky handwriting. "You've been teaching us courage," Jason said quietly. "Time we returned the favor." The next morning, Maria arrived at the center before sunrise. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began practicing in earnest for the first time in 15 years. Her fingers remembered more than she expected. The muscle memory was still there, buried under years of neglect. But her stamina was gone. After 2 hours, her shoulders burned and her wrists ached. A noise made her turn. Miss Thompson stood in the doorway holding 2 coffee cups. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing one to Maria. "The board voted to give you paid leave to prepare." Maria opened her mouth to protest, but Miss Thompson cut her off. "Let people help you, Maria, for once in your life." Outside, the sun rose over the little town, its light creeping across the piano keys. Maria flexed her fingers and began again. This time she wasn't alone. Through the glass walls, she could see her students arriving early, taking their seats quietly to watch their teacher chase her dream. The concerto was still rusty. The runs weren't clean. But for the first time in so long, Maria played without fear. Because finally, she had an audience that truly mattered. The concert hall lights dimmed as Maria stood in the wings, her stomach twisting into knots. She could hear the murmur of hundreds of people settling into their seats. The grand piano on stage gleamed under the spotlights, looking far more intimidating than her familiar community center upright. A warm hand squeezed hers. David Lauren gave her an encouraging nod. "Remember," he whispered, "you've done the hard part already. Now just play like you did for that broken piano." Maria adjusted her simple black dress, the same one she wore for lessons, but tonight it felt different, special. She took a deep breath as the announcer's voice boomed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest soloist, Maria Flores." The applause erupted like thunder. Maria's legs carried her forward on shaky steps. As she reached the piano, her eyes found a familiar group in the third row, Sophie waving wildly, Jason sitting up straight in a borrowed suit, Mr. Petrov dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. The entire community center had come. She sat at the piano, flexing her fingers once. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra's opening notes swelled around her. Then it was her turn. Maria's hands descended onto the keys, and magic happened. All those hours of practice, all those years of silent humming while she mopped floors, all those secret daydreams of playing again, they poured out through her fingers. The music soared through the hall, powerful and perfect. In the middle of the third movement, something unexpected happened. A soft chime sounded from the wings. Then another. Maria kept playing, but her heart leaped as she recognized the sound. Her students were joining in from backstage, playing the simplified version they'd arranged for her on xylophones and glockenspiels. The audience turned in their seats, smiling as the children's simple melody wove beautifully through Maria's complex performance. It shouldn't have worked, a world-class pianist playing Beethoven alongside beginner music students, but it did, perfectly. When the final notes faded, the hall exploded. People jumped to their feet, cheering. Flowers rained onto the stage. Maria turned to see her students beam from the wings, their instruments still raised proudly. Backstage afterward, reporters swarmed with questions. How does it feel? What's next? Maria kept her answer simple, her arm around Sophie's shoulders. Then a television reporter pushed forward. "Miss Flores, your story has gone viral. A major music foundation wants to fund a full youth program at your community center. What do you say to people calling this a Cinderella story?" Maria looked at her students, at Jason helping Mr. Petrov with his coat, at Sophie carefully touching the concert piano with wonder. "It's not about me," she said softly. "It's about what happens when we stop assuming who people are based on what they do." She smiled. Everyone deserves to be heard. That night, as Maria walked home through the quiet streets, she passed the community center. Through the window, she could see the old broken piano still sitting in its corner. She pressed a hand to the glass. That piano had given her back her music. More importantly, it had given her back herself. Tomorrow, she returned to teaching. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself be exactly who she was meant to be. A pianist. The morning after the concert, Maria woke to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. Text messages, voicemails, friend requests from people she'd never met. The local news station wanted an interview. A national morning show wanted her to perform live. She rubbed her eyes, half convinced she was still dreaming. When she arrived at the community center, a crowd had already gathered outside. Not just her regular students, but new faces, parents with shy children, elderly couples holding hands, even a group of teenagers who usually hung out at the skate park. They all turned when she approached, their faces lighting up. Miss Thompson met her at the door, grinning. "You've started something, Maria," she said, leading her inside. The center had transformed overnight. Workers were installing new soundproofing in the music room. Brand new instruments stood in neat rows, not just pianos, but violins, drums, even a harp. A shiny plaque on the wall read, "The Flores Music Initiative." Maria's knees nearly gave out. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The donations started pouring in after your performance," Miss Thompson explained. "That music foundation wasn't kidding. They want this to be a model program." She pressed a key into Maria's hand. "This is yours now. The director's office." Maria stared at the key, her throat tight. Just weeks ago, these same hands had been scrubbing floors. Now they held the future of something much bigger than herself. A tug on her sleeve made her look down. Sophie held up a newspaper with Maria's picture on the front page. "You're famous," the little girl announced. Then she frowned. "But you'll still teach me, right?" Maria knelt to meet Sophie's eyes. "Always," she promised. The day passed in a whirlwind. Maria met with the new teachers they hired. She approved lesson plans. She even gave an impromptu performance for the growing crowd in the lobby. But her favorite moment came at dusk, when most people had left. She found Jason sitting alone in the music room, painstakingly working through a sonata she'd assigned him weeks ago. His brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't notice her watching. Maria remembered the smug teenager who'd mocked her that first day. The change in him, in all of them, took her breath away. As she turned to leave, she spotted Mr. Petrov at the old broken piano in the corner. His gnarled fingers moved slowly but surely across the damaged keys, playing a mournful Russian lullaby Maria didn't recognize but felt deep in her bones. She didn't interrupt. Some music needed no audience. That night, as Maria locked up, she paused by the center's bulletin board. New flyers advertised free music lessons for low-income families, senior citizen choir practice, even a songwriting workshop for teens. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman she barely recognized, standing tall, smiling softly, her eyes full of hope. The janitor's closet still stood in the hallway, its mops and buckets untouched. Maria reached out, running her fingers along the familiar handle. Then she let her hand drop. Some doors were meant to stay closed. 5 years later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, the community center buzzed with excitement. A brass plaque by the entrance now read Flores Community Music Center, and the sounds of dozens of instruments spilled out into the street. Violins tuning, drums practicing rhythms, and always the pianos. Inside, Maria adjusted the collar of her blazer as she greeted guests. At 38, she still couldn't quite believe this was her life. The center had grown beyond anyone's dreams, offering free music education to hundreds of students each year. Maria, Sophie, now 11 in all long limbs and confidence, came barreling through the crowd. "They're ready for you." Today was special. The center was unveiling its newest addition, a state-of-the-art concert hall. But more importantly, they were honoring the instrument that started it all. Maria stepped onto the small stage where the original broken piano now stood, carefully restored but with its scars left visible. The crowd quieted. "This piano," Maria began, running her hand along its weathered surface, "taught me something important. That beauty isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to make music anyway." She sat and played the same simple melody she played that first day. The notes rang pure and clear now, thanks to the restoration, but the feeling remained the same. When she finished, she gestured to the front row. Jason, the once sarcastic teenager, now a college music major, joined her at the piano. Together they played a duet Jason had composed, a piece that wove classical technique with modern rhythms. The audience tapped their feet, some swaying with the music. One by one, other students joined in. Mr. Petrov, now 92, played a brief but flawless Chopin etude. Little Miguel, who'd been born deaf but felt music through vibrations, performed a percussion piece that brought tears to everyone's eyes. As the final notes faded, Maria looked out at the crowd, at the parents holding their children's hands, at the elderly residents who came daily just to listen, at the donors who'd made all this possible. "Music isn't about talent or training," she said softly. "It's about connection, about remembering we all have something beautiful to share." After the ceremony, as people enjoyed refreshments, Maria slipped away to her office. The walls were covered in photos, her first students, newspaper clippings, that life-changing concert with the symphony. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Sophie stood in the doorway holding a small, slightly dented music box. "I made this for you," she said, placing it carefully on Maria's desk. When opened, it played a familiar tune, the first song Maria had ever taught Sophie. Maria pulled the girl into a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, the sounds of laughter and music filled the halls. Maria smiled, remembering the quiet woman who once mopped these floors, afraid to be seen. Somewhere in the building, the original broken piano sat waiting for its next player. Because every day, someone new would come, someone who didn't yet know the music inside them. And thanks to one unexpected moment years ago, they always have a place to find it.